Geoff Dennis, independent emerging markets commentator, joining in. Geoff, is it a race to see whether the trade deal will come first, or the Supreme Court saying that the tariffs are illegal will come first?
Oh, I think it'll be the trade news that'll come first, because all the talk we're getting out of the Supreme Court, or all the commentators who know about the Supreme Court, are saying we're not going to get a decision on this tariff situation from the Supreme Court until December or possibly even January. So although they've begun the process of hearings on this, the Supreme Court decision is going to take several weeks, I think, whereas there's a pretty good chance before then we'll see some easing of the tariff pressure from the US on India.
The other factor, of course, is the statement that Donald Trump has made, acknowledging that US consumers are paying something. He used that word for the higher tariffs. And so there's an acknowledgement finally from the administration that eventually there is a trickle down to the US consumer. Could that be the impetus to sign more trade deals to bring the average tariff back down?
I suppose it could be to bring certain tariffs down and get some of them more in line with the lower averages, let's put it that way. But the policy itself and the pursuit of the policy is something that is absolutely central to President Trump's economic policy and economic thoughts here. They're raising the US substantial amounts of money from tariffs, albeit fairly small compared to the size of the budget deficit. And so I think that the chance of there being backsliding a long way in terms of the tariffs is very unlikely. The tariff policy will stay. Trump thinks it worked. It's brought the trade deficit down somewhat recently. And of course, they're raising a lot of money. So you could see harmonization of some of these tariffs on lower levels for sure. But I think you're right. It is interesting that I guess three sorts of people could pay the tariffs. It could be the exporters who cut their prices. It could be to try and maintain market share in the US. It could be companies who absorb them on their margin. And it finally is going to be the consumer. And we can see that in the shops here. It's very obvious. And so the fact that Trump is saying that is not new news. It's just new that he's saying it.
So therefore, the final question in this context is, how do you look at Indian markets? Because we saw a little bit of an inkling that foreign institutional investors were starting to nibble, but not necessarily buy in a big way. They were unwinding their short positions. But we've seen 6 days straight of selling by foreign institutions once again in the cash market. I'm just wondering when that shift will take place, in your opinion, or should take place at least.
Well, I think to a certain extent it will be driven by global markets themselves. And I think what we haven't discussed here, which is very relevant, is that the clear sign now from the Fed that they may very well not cut interest rates in December has been a setback for the markets. I think also the mixed signals from the labor market. Is there going to be a recession? Is the labor market really weak in the US, or is it not, as those ADP numbers suggested in the last 24 hours or so? And so high valuations in the AI stocks and tech stocks generally, they typically, you don't get that as the real catalyst. You need something to trigger the valuation fears. And I think it's worries about the economy, worries about the Fed, which are contributing, and obviously concern whether earnings could be maintained. Now, if this market in the US continues to drift lower for a period of time, and it may very well do, I don't expect this to be a big sell-off. I think the US market looks pretty good still in the long term. But if we see a bit more selling in the short term, take time, I think, for India to recover. But the case for India now is a very simple one. China's outperformed massively India this year. The valuation gap between the two markets is closed. The scope for the central bank to reduce interest rates, the economy is doing relatively well. And it's fair to say at the margin, you've seen some significant reduction in foreign investor weights in India, and that may be starting to change. But I think before that really makes any sense, and before the Indian market does better, you've got to see global markets settle down, and that may take a few more days, I think it's fair to say.
Okay, a few more days. All right, Jeff, thanks so much for joining us this morning, and pleasure speaking with you as always.
Thank you. Thanks very much.